Our next session of today will be a fireside chat focused on data-driven insights, accelerating the revolution in education. This will be moderated by Dr. Louise Lambert, the Assistant Professor of the United Arab Emirates University, who will lead us in the discussion today and introduce you to our speakers. Over to you, Louise.
Hi, well, thank you, and welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for joining this panel. My name is Dr. Louise Lambert. I'm Assistant Professor at the UAEU. I'm also the editor of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology, and I'm really happy to be here today with two of our guests, Mr. Aaron Lennon, who is joining us from China, and I'm just going to let him introduce himself because he could do a much better job than me. Mr. Aaron.
Thank you very much, Louise. I'm Aaron Lennon. I'm a UK educator. I'm currently co-principal of Yaohua International Education School in Guangzhou in southern China, one of the tier 1 cities in southern China. In terms of my experience this year, which has been an extraordinary year for everybody watching and everybody on the panel, obviously the pandemic affected school-wide education very early on in January, and we had to adapt to online learning very, very quickly once campuses closed. And in the main, schools across China reopened from late April onwards. And we were back in full operation from kindergarten all the way through to the high school by early June. So we've begun our academic year 2020-21 in mid-August. And so far, so good, although obviously things are different around the world, but the situation in China is perhaps a few months ahead of other places in the world. It's good to be here.
Great, thank you, and it's good to have you. We are equally joined by Mr. Christopher McKenzie, who is directly in Riyadh in the middle of all the action, and he is Vice Principal of the Al Fursan International School, and I'll turn it over to him to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, Christopher McKenzie, Vice Principal at Al Fursan International School based in Riyadh. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's a very interesting topic that's I'm looking forward to the discussion ahead of us. I know we don't have much time, so let's get straight into it.
All right, fantastic. So we are here to talk about data and how that can be used to improve student outcomes, learning, school operations even. And so we're going to talk about everything related to that topic. So perhaps we can just start with kind of the obvious. How is data currently being used at the moment to measure student performance or even just in all of schools, and what's problematic about that, and why should we be looking at using data otherwise? Perhaps we could start with Mr. Christopher.
Sure. So currently, the data in use in our setting, it's very much based on in this current climate, the length of time students are spending in classrooms. We're currently using the platform Microsoft Teams, which allows us to track, different various things when the student is attending and submitting homework and assignments. So a lot of the data that we currently have, it's based around numbers. There's nothing really qualitative about the data that we have. And I think that this is something problematic myself, because it only gives us a certain part of the picture. Again, it's a unique circumstance that we found ourselves in this year. So it's a kind of, difficult for us to adapt at such a fast pace. But I think going forwards, it will be something that is definitely required in terms of when we're analyzing the data, to try and add a little bit more, words to those numbers that we're finding on the screen. And of course, traditionally, we use the data, we're collecting data from student quizzes, classroom participation and summative assessment data, which is used not only to inform learning, but to also provide students with their report cards, and for us to look back at the curriculum and see what needs adjusting.
Okay, and I like how you've said that it's kind of quite quantitative at the moment. So attendance, quiz marks, it sounds like, we're kind of using it almost like a spreadsheet. And I'm sure many schools around the world are doing the same thing. Mr. Aaron, what's been your experience with how we're using data at the moment, and what's the problem?
In terms of Online, because Christopher started off with kind of the online environment, we used a platform called ClassIn for our online learning period. And again, like Christopher, we used a lot of the metrics on that for attendance, submission of assignments, breakout classroom time, actual time online, because we decided to, let's say, a 45-minute lesson only have 20 minutes online of that 45 minutes to reduce the impacts of eye strain, particularly on young eyes, and particularly the issues to do with the kind of healthy attitudes to using IT and how much time students were spending in front of a laptop or a mobile phone or whatever device they were using. So a lot of the data, like Christopher, in recent months has been quantitative. But we're back to normal, I would say, normal operation back here in China. And in terms of schools, in terms of the setting, we're kindergarten all the way through to high school. We use enormous amounts of data, and as all schools generate massive amounts of data. A lot of that is quantitative, measuring progress in various forms, measuring evidence from self-review, peer review, teacher assessment of students' work. We also measure data from lesson observations, walkthroughs around lessons. We set SMART targets in teacher appraisal. All of this data that we have in schools is ideally aimed to improve the learning experience and to adapt instruction for our teachers, and to ensure that each and every individual student is making progress. And where there are deficiencies in a student's understanding or the progress they're making, then we can use data to support decisions that we make. I think one of the key issues in any school is how much data there is and how that data is managed, and effective systems of managing that data. Because teachers are very, very busy people, focusing on their instruction, their pastoral care of students as well. And for many, analysing data is not something they enjoy. I do enjoy it. I'm one of those people who actually loves playing with spreadsheets and data and analysing trends and patterns. Maybe I should be AI myself, or maybe I'm that kind of person. But maybe I've got these algorithms going on inside me. But a lot of teachers find that a challenge. They're not statisticians. They find using management information systems in school quite challenging. And management information systems are becoming increasingly complex as more and more data is produced. So I think one of the key issues that face educators in the classroom is the management of data.
Okay, and as you say, and I'm glad you like it, somebody has to like it, but the collection of data can become quite onerous, and also making the decisions of what kind of data we actually collect. So earlier you talked about, much of the data that we collect, and Christopher, you mentioned the same, tends to be quite quantitative or even administrative in terms of attendance, who's doing what, how many minutes are actually spent in particular lessons. And I think many schools are at that stage. So if you could talk a little bit about how do you make that transition from administrative, quantitative data collection to adding more words, as you say, making it more meaningful, useful. What would that look like? Christopher, perhaps we can start with you.
Yeah, I think something that Aaron mentioned, and that's his passion for analyzing and looking at Excel sheets, spreadsheets, if we like. And I think one of the key things is being able to pass that passion over to your faculty, your staff, and share exactly the kind of insights that spark them as educators. Because a majority of our teachers worldwide, they're in it for the children. They want to see the learning. They want to see growth. So by allowing them to see these key insights for student growth, it will actually drive that passion. And you can use this, as we do, to increase our collaboration in analyzing the data. So if we have systems in place, procedures in place in a school setting where you have the data in front of you, once it's been I like to say made a little more clearer, because when you have this Excel sheets, it can be a bit untidy. So you tidy it up a bit and you have it in a presentable way for your teachers, your faculty, the administrative staff, and you sit down together and say, well, what does this mean? Why is this number and that is that number? What happened on this day? What happened on that week? And really ask those in-depth questions to try and pick out exactly what's going on inside the school. And this can really help enhance the core business of education, which is, again, developing those students academically and socially.
And Christopher, if I could just comment, it sounds like what you're saying is one of the key important pieces to using data effectively is getting buy-in and this idea of excitement from teachers to see the value. Otherwise, it becomes just another spreadsheet, another job to do. How do you transmit that? And Aaron, perhaps you've got some insight here as well. How do you get people as excited and about numbers?
I think it sounds simple, but it isn't, is to turn that data into action. Okay, the fact that we've collected all of this data, whether it's on academic progress or progress against baseline targets, or even if we're measuring things like students' emotional resilience, there's all sorts of ways we can actually measure students' well-being as well as their kind of academic performance. But the question we need to ask ourselves as educators is, so what? So what that we've got all this data? How can we turn that data into action? So I think it's creating a culture of where, the spreadsheet is just one thing. It's just a tool. It's actually, how do we use that data and how do we deep dive into targeted data to make it meaningful for each and every student? So that's the key, and it's creating that culture, and that starts with the school leadership in terms of making clear how we can use data and giving teachers really quite concrete examples of how data can be used to improve student progress, outcomes, and also the teacher's own instruction as well.
Yeah, it sounds like that's also another advantage, is helping teachers make the links towards improved teaching, so that this is something they can use to inform their daily activities and processes and practices within the classroom. What's in it for students? And is there a role for getting students excited about this data? Or is that something that they're just not involved in? Is this more a teacher issue?
I think students can, again, school culture, students can generate an awful lot of very, very useful data. Because if we look at our school as a business, our clients or our customers, if we just put the parents to one side, are the students themselves. They're on the receiving end of the instruction, the education that they're receiving. And we want to know what they think about it. We want to know what learning behaviours that they find, or what teacher behaviours and what learner behaviours they can identify, which makes education engaging, and they feel motivated and they enjoy their learning. All of these things, really. So I think it centres around the school climate. So yes, involve the students, absolutely. Because education shouldn't just be done to the students. They should be integrated as part of the process. So using student voice, for instance, or student surveys involving school council and collecting data in numerous ways as to kind of students' viewpoint on their own education. Creates a lot of data, which is very, very useful.
Christopher, do you see a role for students driving their own learning through the data that is collected on them?
Yeah, I mean, the students understanding the goals of where they are heading towards on their learning journey, and being able to self-assess where they are and how they're getting there, and being able to become literate in understanding where they are. These are key factors in, bringing those students in and giving them that motivation to, support their own learning. So I really do think that once students are aware of where they are, because generally speaking, and I say generally, but it does happen that we have students they are in the lesson for X amount of weeks in a semester, and they don't know how they're doing at all until they get to the end of the semester. And I don't just mean academically, but attendance. Students have high levels of absences, and they don't even realize the level of absences that they have. On top of that, when you have other collections of data, for example, behavior violations, and just all the data itself that is related to those students. Once they have an idea, they can see themselves and mirror themselves. You kind of notice that they're willing to kind of bring those numbers up or push those numbers down, and they want to know what to do in order to get to the goals that have been set for them. So these are some of the things that I can put forth.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a clear advantage for teachers, for students. Is there a role for parents when it comes to data? And then we'll move into big data in a second here, but where do parents fit into all of this?
I think that parents are key to their children's learning and key to their development, and their voice is just as important as any other voice that's looking at this data. I believe that the parents themselves, they may have misconceptions about particular areas of the curriculum. They may have misconceptions about the school environment, and by opening up this data and making it user-friendly for our parents and allowing them to see exactly what's taking place, I think it helps us to build that culture of collaboration. It helps us to build that culture of transparency, and it helps to get really targeted voices in terms of the decisions being made from all stakeholders: parents, students, and administrative staff and teachers as well. So I feel that parents, without the parents' voice being heard, you won't get the full rounded decisions that you need.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I think most parents are keenly want to know how their son or daughter is doing at school, their progress that they're making. And most modern management information systems will allow parents to access data sets on progress. What we should be waiting for is the end of semester report or the end of year exams to inform parents of how a child is progressing. I agree with Christopher that in an ideal world, the students will be very self-aware of their goals and targets and where they are in terms of achieving those goals and targets. And a lot of that comes down to the instruction that they're receiving and the awareness of the data that's being passed, whether it's in written form or it's in quantitative form or in oral form, whatever form the school chooses to use. The students are very self-aware of where they are. Parent engagement is vital. The students want to know that their parents are keen behind them and interested. During this process was that being online and also the parents being at home as well, while many workplaces were closed, and lots of parents are working from home, is that the parents could actually sit in on the lessons as well. They could get to know the teachers, they could get to know the methods of instruction, they could get to know their child's interaction with the others, in the class, because we had synchronous online learning. So with the whole class, they're using ClassIn. And it was great. It was brilliant for the parents to actually understand the methodology of the teachers, the character of the teachers, and the way that the teachers interacted with the students. And some of the parents had many surprises about their own child, both in a positive way and for a small minority, perhaps in a negative way in terms of where they thought they were. So yeah, being online and having the parents at home was a real window on their child's education during our time when we were purely online.
And I think as you both mentioned, just seeing those numbers increases accountability for both students, but also it gives parents a way to check up and provides that oversight on that accountability. So what we've been talking about so far is really the use of data. I like to call it version 1.0, spreadsheets, attendance, marks, grades, assessments, and so on. And there's been a lot of talk, particularly in the business world, where we use this idea of big data or even machine learning, AI, and I'm certainly not an expert in this, but we're moving to version 2.0 and using data much more intelligently. And I'm wondering if you can just sort of speak a little bit on what this looks like in an educational context, particularly for viewers who are maybe not quite familiar with what this big data actually means and what that might look like in the classroom.
Okay, a number of this is evolving all the time, and it's difficult to keep track of it because technology marches on at a pace that we're all trying to keep up with. But there's a lot of smart content that's actually being created. The days of the textbooks sitting on the desk are soon to be gone. Not just virtual textbooks, which is just facsimiles of the paper textbook, but smart content which clicks to video, can track the eye movements and interests of the student. Assessments which can identify areas of strength and areas of weakness, and then target perhaps different areas of links to different curriculum areas to support the learning. Or look at differentiated learning where the content, depending on quizzes, might actually be raised or might actually be lowered depending on the performance of the students, so that the students can actually work at a pace which actually suits their ability. So we can use AI and the algorithms in AI to actually determine the kind of progress and ability of the student to a certain degree by thinking about using smart content.
Okay, and it sounds like that's able to give students maybe a better learning experience overall that's more personalized, more tailored to them. Are there currently good examples of where this is happening? Are we using it in schools, or are we still kind of hesitant about going that far? Mr. Christopher, any ideas there?
I think that we're currently in the midst of a very big change worldwide. Things are constantly changing, but at this point in time in education, and I was having this discussion a couple of days ago actually, the use of AI technology in education, it seems to be in its very early stages where we're still trying to figure out exactly what to do with it. Yes, we know that we can have personalized learning. We know that students are able to go on their own learning path through getting answers incorrect and correct and targeting certain parts of the curriculum. However, I don't believe it's going to stop there. And I believe we can go even further. Currently, a lot of schools, international schools that I've worked with, they use the adaptive tests. So you'd have, for example, map data where the test itself is adaptive and it can direct the student to a harder question or easier question. It's quite basic in terms of its artificial intelligence, but it's something that is being used and it does form part of the data. But I still do think we're at early stages, and I still do think that there are a lot of questions that need to be asked before we can really use and enhance what is out there. And I was listening to something interesting yesterday, actually, on the same summit that we're in at the moment. And he mentioned the multiple intelligences and how artificial intelligence is able to target areas of multiple intelligence, but there are humanistic aspects where artificial intelligence still hasn't managed to grasp. So things like idioms when you're having a conversation, that human experience of actually teaching itself. And I think that we have to understand that, okay, where are the limits now and where are the strengths and how can we improve those strengths, and just hold back on trying to fix those limits at the moment until everything settles. So this is kind of my intake on AI in education at the moment.
Are you optimistic about this coming into schools?
I am. I know that a lot of I know that there are some concerns, and there's a big question out there. Will this replace teachers? I think absolutely not. It will not replace teachers, not at all. What will happen, I believe, my prediction is that it will replace the jobs that teachers do that are very automatic, jobs that robots can do, and it will allow us as educators to evolve our approach and our mindset towards helping and supporting these students. And this is why I think the struggle is at the moment. We take away marking books. I'll give you an example. We take away marking books because the machine can do it. The teacher said, okay, what do we do now? They don't know what to do. So we kind of need to figure out exactly what we can do as human beings to really help and enhance the progress for the learning journey for these students. And this is why I believe that we're at this stage at the moment. So I am quite optimistic about it.
Okay, Aaron, optimism, pessimism, what are your thoughts?
I'm pretty optimistic about the potential of this to engage teachers in what they do best, which is teaching. As educators, a lot of what we do is administration. So I agree with Christopher. Anything that AI can do to help us with the back office related tasks and grading and in school, the functions of HR and personnel and logistics and purchasing, all of these systems which kind of operate in the school to support the learning. Anything that is used to actually streamline those processes and make them more efficient will help give teachers more time. At the moment, from Christopher said, people think, oh, okay, what am I going to do with my time? Okay, well, that's another debate, isn't it, in terms of how we push on teaching. And also, as I said at the beginning, there's a huge amount of data in schools, and anything that AI could do to actually tie that data together, to actually analyze that data for teachers. So if we're looking at student performance or student resilience and the linkages between different data sets, I think that taking that task away from teachers and enabling them to actually do something with the data directly with students would be great. So perhaps I'm more interested in those areas at the moment, which are not as glamorous as the areas that Chris was talking about, was the hyper-personalization of using AI in individual student education, and also virtual facilitators and virtual teachers and tutors, and how content can be linked together. That's all really, really glamorous, and virtual 3D assistants popping up, all this type of thing. All that technology exists, but I'm optimistic about that. But first and foremost, let's see how AI, for me, can actually help us use the data more effectively that we already have in schools.
Okay. I keep getting images of the Matrix or some kind of weird tech movie where we say, we're all the humans. You raised, you alluded to issues, and the first word that came to mind was ethical issues, security issues, but also cultural issues. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about this. What's the role of, AI, machine learning, even just using some of this big data? What are some of let's start with ethics. What are some of the perhaps ethical issues that we need to be mindful of in an educational context?
I think we've got to remember that all AI systems are created by humans. And, we've got, we can be biased, we can be judgmental in our viewpoints. And if we're not careful in terms of how we set up AI systems, then we're in danger of building in bias into those systems. So I think we've got really, really careful in terms of how these are designed, and be sensitive to the cultural, social aspects of how we operate in schools.
You touched on something really, when you mentioned that, the AI is created by humans, and that we can have our biases built into those machines. That's it kind of opens up another can of worms, because it's kind of like, okay, at which point do we say that this is ethical, and at which point do we say, this is unethical, and if so, and we want to do this on an international level, where's the line drawn? And even these arguments are taking place now in terms of international curriculums and different biases being implemented in international schools worldwide. But I really like the fact that you brought that to the attention of myself and those listening, that AI does have cultural bias that may be built into it, so we need to be careful about it. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks.
No, that's okay. The other thing that kind of comes to mind is, there's lots of people around the world who shout fake news at a lot of things, and AI is being used to create false images, adapted videos, to influence, let's put it that way, in terms of political debate or social debate. And we need to be really careful in terms of analyze why that might be happening, and be cautious perhaps about what we see in the media, what might be AI generated, and a caution about why that might be created, because that's not always to the benefit of humanity.
Totally with you. Totally with you.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it's a tremendous amount of opportunities, but that line between reality and I don't know if it's irreality, another reality is quite easily blurred.
I don't know whether in the future we'll all have to take the Turing test to determine whether or not we're actually a bot or somebody real.
Exactly.
Maybe that become completely blurred in the future.
Exactly. So I'm mindful of our time, but I'm wondering if maybe we could end with, kind of two areas. One is thinking about if you had, two wishes around better use of data in schools, what would that look like? So it could be big data, AI, little data, spreadsheets, whatever that may be, but also for maybe school leaders, teachers, parents, even students themselves who are a little bit like, why are you collecting all this data on me? Couldn't we, like just why? Who are a little bit cautious or pessimistic about it. What would be some words that you could offer them to make the use of data a little bit more attractive? Let's start with Mr. Christopher.
Two wishes. I think I mean if as I'm sitting there reflecting, I really do wish that students would understand the benefit of this data, and I do think that it's really important for us to try and embed that in the curriculum in terms of applying what they already know. I mean, we do it already with STEM or STEAM, which one you want to use, and I can see this being used in the same way. Understand where you are, or self-assessment, or another kind of elective, or however you want to call it, and using the understanding of math, the understanding of critical thinking through reading, and the understanding of technology to apply it to their own set of data, see where they are, and see how they can get to achieve those goals that have been set for them, or they've set for themselves.
Okay, so it's a little bit like convincing people of the benefit of these wearables tracking your steps and how they can help you lose weight.
Exactly the same concept. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Aaron, any thoughts on your wish list and for
Okay, for number one, as a school principal with access to pretty much every overwhelmed with data, not every teacher's got access to every data set. So, when we're teaching our classes, we've always got an imperfect world. We've got an incomplete picture of our students. We've got our own data set. We might draw in some other data sets, but it's difficult to actually draw everything together. It's a very, very difficult and time-consuming process. So my wish is that we design effective systems that actually draw all these data sets together to actually use AI to give real-world suggestions for instructors, teachers, and also students themselves on ways in which they can improve, where that analysis of different data sets is quite sophisticated. So we do go on a personalized learning journey with students and teachers, but it doesn't replace schools and it doesn't replace teachers. Because one thing that was very, very evident during the online teaching period, particularly with younger students, is during online learning is the lack of social connection with peers. I know many universities will have online courses and access to online courses, but certainly the younger ones will struggle with that lack of social setting. So while we we can use AI to create a hyper-personalized learning experience for the students in many ways, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we need that social context, the schools as communities, because it doesn't really matter. We can use AI perhaps to have those communities at a global scale, not necessarily an individual school scale. But having that social context is very, very important to consider in the design of schools in the future going forward, because we can't forget the fact that as humans, we're very social beings.
Yeah. So keeping in mind that AI, machine learning, is a tool, is a system, but it's certainly not a replacement for teachers in particular, but just that human connection and human contact. All right. Any last words before we wrap up? So the 10-second food for thought that you would like everybody to walk away with at the end of this session.
I would like to just comment and say that it's really important that we begin to ask questions. That's the only way that we're able to move forward and discover how we can benefit from data and how we can benefit from the use of AI and everything else we discussed today. That's get together, collaborate, and ask questions.
Thank you so much.
And
Aaron.
to support that, I totally agree with Christopher, is creating that school climate where we are using data effectively and we are, as educators, sophisticated in our use of data, and the data that we're using is relevant to each and every student making progress.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, Mr. Aaron Lennon, who's meeting us from China, Mr. Christopher Mackenzie, who's currently in Saudi. My name is Dr. Louise Lambert from the UAE, and we wish everybody a continued fantastic conference and hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you to Aaron and Christopher. Lots of chat about AI there, which is very relevant, as our next fireside chat is actually going to be looking even further detail into how AI will shape schools in the future. So please make your way into the next session, and thanks once again to our panelists and to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, another 7 minutes, we'll start. If you need to do anything, get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, we're still time.
All right, thanks.